Have you ever thought about using a building as a weapon? Not with cannons or anything, but with glamour, gossip, and a whole lot of gold? Well, that's pretty much the story of the Palace of Versailles, where a king built not just a home, but an incredible system of control.
I mean, it's a problem for any ruler, right? So King Louis XIV of France, he had this pretty radical idea. You build a palace so magnificent, so demanding, that it becomes this beautiful golden cage for all your potential rivals.
Believe it or not, Versailles didn't start out as this massive, grand palace we all picture. Originally, it was just a small, simple hunting lodge built by King Louis XIII. You know, just a quiet place to get away from it all.
But his son, Louis XIV, he had a much bigger vision. He called himself the Sun King, because he literally wanted all of France to revolve around him, just like the planets revolve around the sun. And for a performance that big, he needed an unforgettable stage.
See, the king ruled with something called absolute power. This is a really key idea. It basically meant his word was law, period. He made every single decision for the entire country, and he believed that God himself had chosen him to be the ruler.
And this is where it gets really clever. Versailles was a masterclass in psychological control. By forcing all the powerful nobles to come live with him, Louis wasn't just watching them, he was distracting them. They were so busy trying to get his attention, spending a fortune on the right outfits, and dealing with court drama that they had zero time or money to plot against him. It was kind of genius, actually.
Okay, so what was life actually like inside this golden cage? Well, you have to imagine it as one constant performance. And the show started the second the king opened his eyes. This whole daily routine was called the lever, which is just French for the waking. And get this, dozens of nobles would literally crowd into his bedroom just to watch him get up. Being the one chosen to hand the king his shirt, that was a massive honor. Sounds totally bizarre, right? But it was a brilliant way to constantly remind everyone exactly where they stood in the social food chain.
And of course, this whole daily performance needed a stage to match. And that stage, well, it was absolutely mind-boggling. The sheer scale of Versailles was designed to just completely awe and intimidate anyone who walked through the gates.
Let's just talk numbers for a second. The palace has over 700 rooms.
And more than 2,000 windows. And they were all designed in the style called French Baroque, which is a fancy way of saying everything was super grand, really dramatic, and perfectly symmetrical. The whole point was just to make your jaw drop. And nowhere is that desire to overwhelm you more obvious than in the palace's most famous room, the Hall of Mirrors. Okay, so picture this, a massive hall lined with 17 huge mirrors that perfectly face 17 giant windows looking out onto the gardens. Now back then, mirrors this big were one of the most expensive luxury items in the entire world. The effect was just dazzling. It created this sense of infinite light and space. And then, if you looked up, the ceiling was covered in paintings celebrating the king's military victories. It was basically pure propaganda, built right into the architecture.
And this obsession with scale didn't just stop at the doors. Oh no. The gardens are just as extreme. We're talking 800 hectares filled with these perfectly symmetrical paths, hundreds of statues, and 50 massive fountains. They actually had to invent a whole new engineering system just to pump in enough water to run them.
So, with all this grandeur, what was it really like to live there? Well, life at Versailles wasn't just about politics. It was a non-stop 24/7 competition where your status depended on what you wore, what you said, and how you acted. It was all about winning the king's attention.
Fashion was basically a uniform for the elite. Men wore these long, embroidered silk coats, while women were in these enormous dresses with super wide skirts held out by wooden frames. And everyone, men and women, wore these giant powdered wigs and high-heeled shoes. The king even made red heels a special symbol. If you were wearing those, it meant you were in his inner circle.
The evenings were just packed. There were operas, balls, high-stakes card games, you name it. Every single event was just another opportunity to see and be seen, another chance to get noticed by the king. Life there was never, ever quiet.
But behind all that gold and glamour, the daily reality of cramming thousands of people into one building was, let's just say it was far from perfect. For starters, there was no indoor plumbing like we have today. So with thousands of people and animals living there, well, the palace often smelled pretty terrible. Those huge, high-ceilinged rooms were freezing in the winter, And since bathing wasn't really a thing, people just covered up body odor with a ton of heavy perfume.
And paying for all this? It cost an absolute fortune. A huge percentage of the entire national budget, paid for by taxes from ordinary citizens, was spent on Versailles. The spending on parties, servants, and constant redecorating was just enormous, all while many people in France were living in poverty.
So you have this glittering bubble at Versailles, and then this huge gap between the super rich at court and the struggling people outside. That kind of situation couldn't last forever. It was just bound to burst. And it did. In 1789, the French Revolution brought the whole era to a sudden and violent end. A crowd of angry, hungry citizens marched all the way from Paris and forced the royal family to leave the palace for good. After that, it was no longer the center of power and was eventually turned into the incredible museum we can visit today. So Versailles is this absolutely breathtaking monument, not just to art and beauty, but to the incredible ambition and, in the end, the fragility of a king who built his own world. It really leaves us with a question, doesn't it? How much of power is about real strength, and how much is just about creating a spectacular, convincing illusion?